doing activities, all those things become illegal. You can be arrested for sleeping on the street, you can be arrested for eating or drinking in public, for going to the bathroom in public, even when there aren't any other facilities available. You get an arrest on your record, you maybe go to jail, you have fines to pay that you can't pay because you're homeless. With that arrest on your record, it becomes more difficult to get into housing, to get a job, to maintain a job. 40% of homeless people are working at any given time, but they don't have enough to make ends meet, or they can't build up to their, the first month and last month deposit and a security deposit. And especially when you're thrown out with so little notice and no way of getting back your security deposit from your previous rental, it makes it almost impossible to get back into housing again. In the current foreclosure crisis, a lot of people have heard a lot about the homeowners who have lost their homes, but there are a lot of renters whose landlords have been foreclosed on. And up until recently, all those people were being, when the landlord was foreclosed, all the people in the building who never got any notice, that all the notices were going to the landlord, they would just be thrown out on the streets. But again, that money that they had put into invested in their apartments was lost, and they had no way of obtaining alternative housing. And so you just see this cycle of homelessness that gets worse and worse and worse, and there's no way out for people. And all of it could be stopped with very simple interventions in many cases. We were able to get a law passed last year called the Protecting Tenants in Foreclosure Act. It requires landlords to give at least 90 days notice if they're going into foreclosure, that allows foreclosures to survive, or the leases to survive the foreclosure, so that people can stay in their buildings, and so that you don't have people just being thrown out on the street. But even still, often those people aren't getting their deposits back, and to try and get into new housing, they need resources. Often it's just that first and last month's rent, they can go on and sustain themselves. There were some funds made available under the Stimulus Act, but it's not enough. And so this housing crisis in the U.S. is getting worse. The bailout that happened was focused on the banks. It was not focused on ensuring the right to housing. And that's why we're seeing the pictures that we're seeing here and the pictures that we're seeing all across the country. And it had, any stint of homelessness for a child is a predictor for future homelessness for that child, for that person as an adult. When you lose your housing, if you're a child, how can you study in school? You lose your friends as you have to move from place to place. It has ripple effects that go on, for generations. And like I said, there are solutions that can be put in place. We can stop the criminalization of homelessness. We can remove the ban on arrests for getting into public housing. I mean, it's a crazy fact that in many cases, the very arrests that people get because they're homeless, because they're living their lives outside, are then used against them to prevent them from getting into public housing. And so, they have to go back on the streets. There's many other countries in the world who have a better way of keeping at least a basic social safety net for their families. One of my colleagues out in Seattle runs a program that helps chronically homeless people, people with drug addictions and other problems, get and stay in permanent supportive housing. And they were being called up by somebody from Copenhagen who said, we want to come and study your program because for chronically homeless people, you need specific kinds of outreach that they have expertise in. And he said, well, we have all this expertise in this area. What about family homelessness? And the person from Copenhagen said, oh, we don't have family homelessness here. we ensure a basic safety net for all of our people. I mean, he was just very confused by the even notion of the question, and that's the disconnect that we see between, you know, the right to housing that is enjoyed by other people in the rest of the world and what we have in the U.S. I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about your experience?
Yeah. As I stated earlier, I have been a victim of being displaced by rent going up so high, and one thing that me experiencing this, and I look back, is watching community residents in Los Angeles is the instability affected by the children. As some wounds can heal and some wounds can't heal. And instability is a wound that when you experience it as a child is something that we face every day in our community. Seeing a kid not knowing where they're going to sleep that night, and it's the feeling of, well, mama, where we're going to sleep, what we're going to eat, and being subjected to abuse by either the individuals, if you're in a mission or a shelter, you know, the abuse that we can find ourselves subjected to by the people who's running the program. And I'm just going to talk about me. Sleeping in a strange bed can be very uncomfortable, especially, you know, when you don't know who slept before that, what time you got to get up, what you're going to eat. Do I have to go to school? Do they have a school close to us? Meeting new folks that you're not familiar with. So those things that, you know, I find myself addressing in our community and seeing the impacts of how would this affect them tomorrow, how long they're going to be subjected to this. And it can be very discouraging, but yet still the work that we're doing in Los Angeles is rewarding, because there are some progress making sure that individuals get the housing that they need at a minimum max of time in a short time. But we need more. We need more in Los Angeles. We need more in the state of California, and we need more across the countries and around the world. So things like what I just saw, you know, we have that abundance of people being subjected to being homeless. As I said earlier, Los Angeles, California is the homeless capital in the nation. The only place that we know we have more homeless in Bangkok, but in America, in California, and especially in Los Angeles, we have folks coming to the city thinking that there are resources, and we have been impacted by not enough resources to meet the goals and the needs of our residents. Since the 1970s, our housing and resources have been steadily dwindling, as I said earlier. HUD has not fully funded these public housing programs since the 1970s, and what they're doing now is that our only safety net is being at risk, because most of the folks that live in public housing is people of color and people of low income. Minimum wage jobs is what we have. Most residents, the jobs that they have. But now, you know, that's been at risk. So, and not only the public housing projects being at risk, but any rent control units in Los Angeles being at risk of being converted from affordable for low income.